The crack of gunfire echoed across the dusty Nebraska plains as Gabriella Zander pressed her back against the rough wooden slats of the jailhouse, her heart hammering wildly in her chest. It was 1876, and in a matter of moments, her life in Wood River had shattered like prairie glass beneath a boot heel. "Get her in the wagon," Sheriff Mills barked, his voice cold as he gestured toward the covered wagon waiting outside. "Nobody's gonna miss a schoolteacher with ideas above her station." Gabriella's wrists burned against the coarse rope binding them. At 22, she'd come west with dreams of independence and purpose, not to be kidnapped by the very men sworn to uphold the law. Her crime: discovering Sheriff Mills and Mayor Hastings had been stealing from the school fund and confronting them about it. "Please," she begged as two deputies dragged her toward the wagon. "I have students waiting. People will look for me." Sheriff Mills laughed, a sound like stones rattling in a tin can. "Not where you're going, they won't." They threw her into the back of the wagon like a sack of grain. The canvas cover snapped closed, plunging her into shadow. Through gaps in the fabric, she saw the town she'd called home for the past year growing smaller as the wagon jolted forward, heading north into open country. 3 days to the Dakota Territory, one of the deputies called to the driver. Then she's Blackwell's problem. Gabriella's blood ran cold. Everyone knew of Jeremiah Blackwell, the mining baron whose isolated compound was rumored to be a place where inconvenient people disappeared. She struggled against her bonds, but the rope only bit deeper into her skin. For hours, the wagon bumped along rutted trails. With each mile, Wood River and Hope receded further behind her. Gabriella tried to map their route in her mind, but disorientation and fear muddled her thoughts. By nightfall, when the wagon finally stopped, she had no idea where they were. The canvas flap opened. The deputy called Hank thrust a canteen at her. "Drink," he ordered. "Don't need you dying before delivery." Gabriella sipped the tepid water. "Why are you doing this? I'm a schoolteacher." "A schoolteacher who shouldn't have stuck her nose where it don't belong." He replaced the canvas, leaving her alone again. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by every jolt and creak of the wagon. By dawn of the second day, Gabriella had worked one hand partly free, rubbing the rope against a nail protruding from the wagon's frame. Her wrist was raw and bleeding, but freedom seemed tantalizingly close. The wagon rumbled to life again. Through the canvas, Gabriella saw they were traveling through increasingly desolate country. Sparse grasslands gave way to scrubby hills. They passed no towns, no homesteads, just emptiness stretching toward distant horizons. Midday brought scorching heat. Sweat plastered Gabriella's dark hair to her forehead and neck. Her throat burned with thirst, but no one offered water. She was about to call out when the wagon suddenly slowed. "Rider coming," the driver shouted. Hoofbeats approached rapidly and the wagon lurched to a stop. Gabriella strained to see through the canvas. "State your business," a deep voice commanded. "Just delivering goods north," the driver replied. "Nothing that concerns you, mister." "Is that so?" The stranger's voice carried authority. "Then you won't mind if I take a look at your cargo." "Now see here." The distinctive click of a revolver hammer being pulled back cut off the driver's protest. "I said, I'm looking at your cargo." Footsteps circled the wagon. Gabriella held her breath as the canvas was pulled aside, revealing a tall man silhouetted against the bright sky. She couldn't make out his features, but she saw the gleam of a silver star pinned to his vest. "Madam," he addressed her, "are you traveling of your own free will?" "No," Gabriella gasped, finding her voice. "They're taking me to Blackwell in the Dakota Territory. Please help me." The stranger's posture stiffened. In a flash, his gun was trained on the driver again. "Step down," he ordered. "Both of you, hands where I can see them." The driver and Hank complied, cursing under their breath. "You're interfering with official business," Hank protested. "Sheriff Mills has no authority this far north," the stranger cut him off. "And kidnapping isn't official business anywhere I know of." As the men faced off outside, Gabriella worked desperately at her bindings. Her right hand slipped free just as a gunshot cracked the air. She froze, heart in her throat. The canvas parted again and the stranger peered in. This time, Gabriella could see his face weathered by sun and wind, with piercing blue eyes beneath the brim of a battered hat. He holstered his gun and reached for her bound hand. "Quinn Ingram, U.S. Marshal," he said, his voice gentler than before. "Let's get you out of there, miss." "Gabriella Zander," she replied, wincing as he carefully untied her bleeding wrists. "I'm the schoolteacher in Wood River." "Well, Miss Zander, you're a long way from your schoolhouse." He helped her down from the wagon. Outside, the driver sat on the ground clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. Hank lay face down in the dirt, hands tied behind his back. "I only winged him," Marshal Ingram explained, noticing her gaze. "Despite what they deserve. Where are we?" Gabriella asked, legs unsteady after so long confined in the wagon. "About 40 miles northeast of Wood River, heading toward the Dakota border." He studied her for a moment. "You're in no shape to travel back tonight. My camp's not far. We'll get you patched up, then figure out what to do with these two. And then," Marshal Ingram's expression hardened, "then we have a conversation about Sheriff Mills and whoever else was behind this." Quinn led Gabriella to his horse, a magnificent chestnut stallion that stood patiently nearby. He helped her mount before securing the two men to their own wagon. "Can you ride?" he asked, looking up at her. Gabriella nodded, though in truth she'd only ridden occasionally. The marshal seemed to read her uncertainty. "Hold tight to the saddle horn. Rusty's gentle enough." He took the reins and led the horse, with the wagon following behind. They traveled for perhaps half an hour, descending into a small, sheltered valley where a creek meandered between cottonwood trees. A simple camp was established near the water, just a bedroll, a small fire ring and saddlebags hanging from a tree branch. "It's not much," Quinn said as he helped her down, "but it's secure." Gabriella sank gratefully onto a fallen log while Quinn secured the prisoners, making sure they had water but keeping them bound to the wagon. "Let me see those wrists," he said when he returned. From his saddlebag, he produced a small tin of salve and clean strips of cloth. His hands were surprisingly gentle for their size as he cleaned her abraded skin. "You're lucky," he commented. "No serious damage." "Lucky," Gabriella repeated, the word tasting bitter. "They were taking me to Blackwell." Quinn's hands paused momentarily. "I know Blackwell. He's been on my list for some time." He resumed bandaging her wrists. "Want to tell me how a schoolteacher ended up in this situation?" As the sun began to set, painting the Nebraska sky in vivid orange and purple, Gabriella recounted the events that had led to her abduction. Quinn listened without interruption, building a small fire as she spoke. "I noticed discrepancies in the school accounts," she explained. "Funds that were approved by the town council never reached the school. When I asked Mayor Hastings about it, he brushed me off. So I started keeping records, noting every missing dollar." "And they found out," Quinn surmised. Gabriella nodded. "Last night I stayed late grading essays. Sheriff Mills and his deputies came to the schoolhouse. They said I was under arrest for theft, that I'd been stealing the missing money. When I showed them my records proving it was them." She shuddered at the memory. "They dragged me to the jailhouse. This morning they put me in that wagon." Quinn handed her a tin cup of coffee. "You've stirred up quite a hornet's nest, Miss Zander." "Gabriella, please," she said, accepting the cup gratefully. And I didn't intend to stir anything. I just wanted books for my students. Corruption runs deep in some of these towns, Quinn said, his voice taking on a harder edge. Mills and Hastings aren't the first officials I've encountered lining their pockets at the expense of decent folks. What will happen now? Gabriella asked. Tomorrow, we head back toward Wood River, but not into town. I have colleagues in the area. We'll get statements from these two, he nodded toward the prisoners, and build a proper case. They'll deny everything, Gabriella said. Quinn smiled for the first time, a brief flash of white teeth in his tanned face. Most do, but a U.S. Marshal showing up with a kidnapped schoolteacher and two men caught in the act tends to loosen tongues. As darkness fell completely, Gabriella found herself studying her rescuer in the firelight. Marshal Quinn Ingram was not what she'd expected. His face was lean and angular, with a straight nose and firm jaw covered in dark stubble. He wore simple clothing, dark trousers, a blue cotton shirt, and a leather vest with his marshal's badge rather than the flashy attire some lawmen favored. "How did you know to stop that wagon?" she asked suddenly. Quinn looked up from the fire. "I didn't, not specifically. I've been tracking movements in and out of Blackwell's operation for months. That route is one his men use." He paused. "But they don't usually travel so openly in daylight. It made me suspicious." "Then I'm fortunate you were there." "Fortunate," he echoed her earlier tone. "Or perhaps it's Providence." They fell into silence, the crackling fire and night sounds of the prairie filling the space between them. Despite her ordeal, Gabriella felt oddly at peace in this small camp with this quiet, competent man. For the first time since the deputies had burst into her schoolhouse, she allowed herself to believe she might have a future beyond the next sunrise. "You should rest," Quinn said eventually. "Take my bedroll. I'll keep watch." Gabriella wanted to protest, but exhaustion overwhelmed her. She settled onto the bedroll, wrapping herself in the woolen blanket that smelled of horses, tobacco, and something uniquely masculine that she assumed was Quinn himself. "Thank you," she murmured. "For everything." In the firelight, she thought she saw a softening in his expression before sleep claimed her. Morning brought clarity and pain in equal measure. Every muscle in Gabriella's body ached from her confinement in the wagon and the stress of her ordeal. She woke to find Quinn already up, coffee brewing over a small fire. "Sleep well?" he asked, handing her a steaming cup. "Better than I expected," she admitted. Her gaze drifted to the wagon where the two men remained secured. "What about them? They'll live," Quinn said dryly. "Though Hank there tried to convince me all night that he was just following orders, as if that excuses anything." After a simple breakfast of hardtack and jerky, Quinn helped Gabriella mount Rusty again. This time he swung up behind her, his chest a solid presence against her back as they set off with the wagon in tow. "We're heading to a place called Clearwater," he explained. "Small settlement about 20 miles south of here. There's a telegraph office. I can send word to my superiors and arrange proper transport for the prisoners." Gabriella nodded, acutely aware of his proximity as they rode. She'd never been this close to a man before, certainly not one whose arms encircled her, even if only to hold the reins. "What about me?" she asked. "I can't go back to Wood River, can I?" Quinn was silent for a moment. "Not yet," he finally said. "Not until we've dealt with Mills and Hastings. They need to face justice before you'll be safe there. My students will have to manage without you for a time," he said gently. "Your life matters more than their lessons right now." The journey to Clearwater took most of the day. They traveled cross-country, avoiding main roads. Quinn explained he wasn't taking chances with Gabriella's safety. Mills might have sent others looking for them when his men didn't return. They spoke little during the ride, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. Gabriella found herself relaxing against Quinn's solid frame as the miles passed, the rhythm of the horse's gait lulling her into a sense of security she hadn't felt in days. Clearwater proved to be little more than a cluster of buildings around a dusty crossroads, but it had the essentials: a general store, a small hotel, and most importantly, a telegraph office. Quinn helped Gabriella dismount before leading the prisoners to the local sheriff's office. "Wait here," he told her, indicating a bench outside the general store. "I'll arrange everything." Gabriella sat, grateful for the rest, watching as Quinn efficiently handled the situation. The local sheriff emerged, looking startled at the arrival of a U.S. Marshal with prisoners. Within the hour, Quinn had sent telegrams, secured the prisoners in the Clearwater jail, and returned to where Gabriella waited. "It's done," he said, sitting beside her. "My superiors are sending additional marshals to Wood River. They'll arrive within 2 days to arrest Mills and Hastings." Relief flooded through Gabriella, though it was quickly followed by uncertainty. "What happens now? Where do I go?" Quinn studied her face for a long moment. "I have a proposition for you, Miss Zander. My family owns a ranch about a day's ride from here, the Lazy Eye. My mother's there and my younger sister. You'd be safe with them while this plays out." "Your family?" Gabriella hadn't considered Quinn might have family nearby. He nodded. "My father's gone, but my mother runs the place with an iron hand." A hint of fondness softened his expression. "She'd welcome the company, especially another educated woman. My sister Emma's about your age and teaches the local children as well." "You're inviting me to stay with your family. You hardly know me." "I know enough," Quinn said simply. "You stood up for what was right, even at risk to yourself. That tells me all I need to know about your character." The offer was unexpected but undeniably appealing. The alternative was staying alone in this tiny settlement, vulnerable and exposed. "I accept," Gabriella said. "Thank you." They spent the night at Clearwater's small hotel. Quinn insisting on paying for separate rooms despite Gabriella's protests about the expense. The following morning, they set out for the Lazy Eye Ranch, leaving behind the wagon and its unpleasant memories. This time, Quinn provided Gabriella with a horse of her own, a gentle mare borrowed from the livery stable. "Can you manage?" he asked as he adjusted the stirrups for her. "I'll be fine," she assured him, more confident now than she had been the day before. "I rode occasionally in Pennsylvania before coming west." Quinn smiled, that rare expression that transformed his stern features. "Pennsylvania, huh, long way from home." "Nebraska is home now," she said firmly. "Or it was, I'm not sure anymore." They rode south and west, leaving the more settled lands for rolling prairie punctuated by stands of cottonwood and willow along meandering creeks. Quinn pointed out landmarks as they traveled: a distinctive hill shaped like a sleeping buffalo, a lightning-struck oak that had somehow survived and grown twisted, the distant smudge of smoke that indicated a homestead. "How did you become a marshal?" Gabriella asked as they paused to rest the horses at midday. Quinn leaned against a sun-warmed boulder, hat tipped back on his head. "War changed things," he said after a moment. "I rode with the 7th Kansas Volunteer Cavalry during the late unpleasantness. After I couldn't settle back into ranch life, too restless," he shrugged. "A former commander recommended me for the marshal's service, been doing it 8 years now." "You ever regret it? It seems a lonely life." Something flickered in his blue eyes. "Sometimes, but it suits me." He straightened, clearly uncomfortable with the personal turn of the conversation. "We should keep moving. Still a fair distance to go." By late afternoon, they crested a rise and Quinn reined in his horse. Below them spread a verdant valley, bisected by a ribbon of silver water. Nestled against the far hillside sat a sprawling ranch house with several outbuildings and corrals. Cattle dotted the surrounding pastures. "The Lazy Eye," Quinn announced with quiet pride. "Been in my family since '51 when my father came west from Missouri." "It's beautiful," Gabriella breathed. After days of fear and uncertainty, the pastoral scene before her seemed almost unreal in its tranquility. As they descended into the valley, a figure emerged from the main house, shading her eyes against the westering sun. By the time they reached the yard, a woman of perhaps 50 stood waiting, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a practical bun. Despite her years, she stood straight as a cottonwood, with Quinn's same blue eyes in a face lined by weather and laughter. "Quinn Ingram, you're 2 weeks late and don't think I haven't noticed," she called, her stern tone belied by the smile spreading across her face. Quinn dismounted and embraced her. "Sorry, Mother, got sidetracked by work." He turned toward Gabriella. "This is Miss Gabriella Zander. She needs a safe place to stay for a while." Martha Ingram's assessing gaze took in Gabriella's disheveled appearance, the bandages still visible on her wrists, and the exhaustion she couldn't hide. Without hesitation, the older woman stepped forward. "You poor dear. Whatever happened, you're safe now. Come inside, you look dead on your feet." Gabriella found herself ushered into a surprisingly comfortable ranch house, where warmth and the aroma of baking bread enveloped her. While Quinn saw to the horses, Martha settled Gabriella at a large oak table and placed a cup of tea before her. "Now," she said, sitting opposite, "Quinn's telegram mentioned trouble, but he's never been one for details. Would you like to tell me what brings you here with my son?" Something in Martha's direct, but kind manner made the words pour out of Gabriella. She recounted the events in Wood River, her kidnapping, and Quinn's timely rescue. Martha listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or frowning as the tale unfolded. "Shameful business," she declared when Gabriella finished, "but not uncommon, I'm sorry to say. Power corrupts even in small places like Wood River." "Your son saved my life," Gabriella said softly. Martha smiled. "Quinn has a strong sense of justice, gets it from his father." Her expression grew wistful. Henry would have done the same. The door opened, admitting Quinn and a younger woman with the same dark hair and blue eyes, though her face held more of Martha's softness than Quinn's angular features. "Emma, meet Miss Gabriella Zander," Martha said. "She'll be staying with us for a time." Emma Ingram's smile was immediate and warm. "Finally, another woman under 40 on this ranch. You've answered my prayers, Miss Zander. Gabriella, please. Then you must call me Emma." She sat beside Gabriella. "Quinn says you're a teacher too." "In Wood River, yes, or I was. We have much to discuss then. I teach the children from the surrounding homesteads. Nothing formal like a proper town school, but Emma," Quinn interrupted gently, "perhaps give Miss Zander time to breathe before overwhelming her." Emma laughed. "You're right, of course. Forgive me, Gabriella. I get carried away when I'm excited." "No forgiveness needed," Gabriella assured her. "It's refreshing after everything." Martha stood decisively. "Well, you'll be wanting a proper wash and clean clothes. Emma will show you to the guest room. Dinner's in an hour, and I expect both my children at the table promptly." Quinn nodded, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "Yes, madam." As Emma led her upstairs, Gabriella glanced back to see Quinn watching her, his expression unreadable but intense. Something fluttered in her chest, gratitude, certainly, but perhaps something more she wasn't ready to examine too closely. The guest room was small but charming, with a patchwork quilt on the bed and curtains that stirred in the breeze from an open window. Emma brought warm water for washing and a dress that was slightly too long but otherwise fit well enough. "It's mine from before I stopped growing," Emma explained. Mother's altering some others for you, but this will do for dinner. You're all being so kind, Gabriella said, overwhelmed. I can't repay nonsense, Emma interrupted. Quinn brought you here, which means your family now, at least temporarily. She hesitated. Besides, it's nice to see him actually bringing someone home. He's been so solitary since the war. Before Gabriella could respond to that intriguing statement, Emma excused herself to help with dinner preparations. Left alone, Gabriella washed away the dust and fear of the past days, allowing herself to feel truly safe for the first time since the deputies had burst into her schoolhouse. Dinner was a revelation, not just the abundant food after days of deprivation, but the warm family dynamic that enveloped the table. Martha presided with affectionate authority, drawing out stories and ensuring everyone ate their fill. Emma bubbled with enthusiasm about her students and plans for the small schoolhouse the ranchers had built last year. Quinn spoke less than the women, but Gabriella noticed how attentively he listened, occasionally adding a dry observation that made the others laugh. He seemed different here, more relaxed, the hard edges of the lawman softened by family ties. "Will you be staying long, Quinn?" Martha asked as they finished their apple pie. He hesitated, glancing at Gabriella. "A few days at least. I need to ride into town tomorrow and send additional telegrams. Then I'll head to Wood River once the other marshals arrive to make the arrests." "And Gabriella," Emma asked, "stays here where it's safe," Quinn said firmly. "For as long as she needs," Martha added. "Your father always said our door stands open to those in need." Later, as the household settled for the night, Gabriella found herself unable to sleep despite her exhaustion. The moonlight streaming through her window beckoned, and she wrapped a shawl around her shoulders before slipping downstairs and out onto the wide porch that wrapped around the house. The night was cool but not cold, the sky a vast canvas of stars more brilliant than she'd ever seen in town. She leaned against a post, breathing in the scent of grass and distant water. "Couldn't sleep." Quinn's voice came from the shadows at the far end of the porch. Gabriella started. "You startled me. Sorry." He moved closer, moonlight revealing he'd removed his vest and gun belt. In shirt sleeves with his hair slightly tousled, he looked younger, less the stern lawman and more the rancher's son. "Too quiet out here for city folk sometimes." "It's not that," she said. "It's everything. 3 days ago I was teaching multiplication tables. Then I was being kidnapped, rescued, and now I'm here. It doesn't seem real." Quinn nodded. "The West can change your life in an eye blink, for better or worse." "Which was it for you?" she asked, emboldened by darkness. He was silent so long she thought he might not answer. "Both," he finally said. "Lost my father to a Comanche raid in '68. Found purpose in the Marshal's service after drifting post-war. Met good people and hunted bad ones." He paused. "Seen too many innocent folks caught in between like you were. Yet you still believe in justice." "Have to," he said simply. "Otherwise, what's the point of any of it?" Gabriella studied his profile in the moonlight. "You're not what I expected a lawman to be." A corner of his mouth lifted. "No, what did you expect? Someone more? I don't know." Boastful, perhaps. Quick to violence. The sheriff in Wood River wore his badge like it entitled him to whatever he wanted. "Men like that shame the badge," Quinn said, his voice hardening. "The law isn't about power over others. It's about protection, ensuring even the weakest have a chance at life and liberty." "You sound like a philosopher, not a marshal," Gabriella teased gently. Quinn actually chuckled, the sound warming something inside her. "Don't tell anyone. Ruin my reputation." They stood in companionable silence for a time, watching the moonlight silver the grass beyond the yard. "Thank you," Gabriella said eventually. "Not just for saving me, but for bringing me here. Your family is wonderful." "They like you," Quinn replied. "Mother especially." She's been after Emma and me to settle down for years. He cleared his throat. Not that I'm implying I understood, Gabriella assured him, hiding a smile at his rare moment of awkwardness. But I can't impose indefinitely. Once this business with Mills and Hastings is resolved, I'll need to decide what comes next. Would you return to Wood River? To teaching? I don't know, she admitted. I love teaching, but after this, I'm not sure I could feel safe there again. Quinn turned to face her fully, his expression earnest in the moonlight. When I return from Wood River, we'll figure it out. You have options, Gabriella. You're not alone in this. The way he said her name sent a curious warmth through her chest. You've done more than enough already. Maybe I haven't done nearly enough, he said softly. Before she could decipher his meaning, he straightened, professional manner returning. You should get some rest. Tomorrow we'll come early around here. Gabriella nodded, suddenly aware of how close they stood. Good night, Marshal Ingram. Quinn, he corrected. Just Quinn. Good night, Quinn, she whispered, turning to go inside before he could see the flush she felt rising in her cheeks. True to Quinn's word, the lazy eye came alive with activity well before dawn. By the time Gabriella came downstairs, Martha was already preparing breakfast while Emma set the table. Through the window, Gabriella could see Quinn in the yard, conferring with a weathered man she hadn't met yet. That's Ezra, our foreman, Martha explained, following her gaze. Been with us since before Quinn was born, practically family. Breakfast was hearty eggs, bacon, biscuits, and strong coffee. Quinn ate quickly, explaining he needed to ride into the nearby town of Brookfield to send telegrams and check for replies. Will you be gone long? Gabriella found herself asking. Back by nightfall, he promised. Brookfield's only 15 miles east. After he'd gone, Martha put Gabriella to work helping with household tasks. Nothing heals the spirit like useful work, she declared, setting Gabriella to kneading bread dough while she preserved peaches from the small orchard behind the house. By midday, Gabriella's arms ached pleasantly from the unaccustomed labor, but her mind felt clearer than it had in days. Emma returned from the small schoolhouse where she taught 3 days a week, bringing news from the neighboring ranches and eager to discuss teaching methods with Gabriella. Most of my students only attend when they can be spared from farm work, Emma explained as they shelled peas on the porch. Makes consistency difficult. I had similar challenges in Wood River, Gabriella said. Children would disappear during planting and harvest. I started lending books for them to take home, hoping they'd at least read when they couldn't attend. That's brilliant, Emma exclaimed. I never thought of a lending system. Did it work? For some. Others returned the books spotted with chicken feed or smelling of cow barns, but I counted it a victory if the pages were turned. They laughed together, and Gabriella realized it was the first time she'd truly laughed since her ordeal began. The simple pleasure of female companionship after days of fear was like cool water to a parched throat. The afternoon passed in similar domestic harmony. Martha showed Gabriella her kitchen garden and the clever irrigation system Quinn's father had designed to bring creek water to the vegetables during dry spells. When Ezra brought in a string of trout from the creek, Martha taught Gabriella how to clean and cook them. Every woman should know how to feed herself from what the land provides, Martha insisted. Schools teach reading and figures, which matter plenty, but survival matters more out here. By sunset, Gabriella had absorbed more practical knowledge than a week of books could have provided. She was helping set the table when hoofbeats in the yard announced Quinn's return. He entered, bringing the scent of dust and horses with him, his expression serious as he greeted his mother and sister. When his eyes met Gabriella's, something in them softened momentarily before he looked away. News? Martha asked, placing a platter of fried trout on the table. Quinn nodded, washing his hands in the basin by the door before joining them. The other marshals reached Wood River yesterday. Mills and Hastings are in custody, along with the remaining deputies involved in Miss Zander's abduction. Relief washed through Gabriella. So it's over. Not quite, Quinn said, accepting the plate Martha passed him. There will be a trial. You'll need to testify. When? Circuit judge arrives in 2 weeks. They'll hold the proceedings in Wood River as a message to the townspeople. Gabriella's appetite vanished at the thought of returning to face the men who had tried to silence her permanently. Must I go back? Quinn's expression was sympathetic but firm. Justice requires witnesses, Gabriella. Without your testimony, they might escape the full penalty for their crimes. Quinn, Martha chided, let the poor girl eat before burdening her with trials and testimony. He inclined his head in acknowledgement. You're right. My apologies, Miss Zander. The formality stung after the previous night's easy conversation. Throughout dinner, Quinn seemed distant, answering questions about his trip to Brookfield but volunteering little else. Gabriella wondered what had changed, but had no opportunity to ask. After the meal, Quinn excused himself to attend to correspondence, leaving the women to clean up. Emma shot Gabriella a questioning look but said nothing until Martha had gone upstairs. Quinn seems preoccupied, Emma observed, drying a plate. Did something happen between you two? Gabriella nearly dropped the cup she was washing. What? No, of course not, Emma smiled knowingly. He looks at you differently than other people he's helped, and he's helped plenty over the years. He saved my life, Gabriella said carefully. I'm grateful, that's all. Hum. Emma's tone made it clear she wasn't convinced. Well, whatever it is, I haven't seen him this unsettled since Caroline Bennett refused his proposal before the war. He was engaged, almost. Emma shrugged. Caroline couldn't bear the thought of life on a ranch, married a shopkeeper in St. Louis instead. She glanced at Gabriella. Quinn doesn't open his heart easily, not anymore, but when he does. Emma, Gabriella interrupted, you're reading too much into common decency. Your brother is a good man doing his job. Emma's smile was infuriatingly perceptive. If you say so. Despite her protests, Gabriella found herself replaying Quinn's behavior, searching for the meaning behind his sudden formality. As she prepared for bed, a soft knock at her door startled her. Quinn stood in the hallway, a book in his hand. Thought you might like something to read, he said. Emma mentioned you're fond of literature. Gabriella accepted the leather-bound volume. Tennyson, she read from the cover. One of my favorites. I remembered you quoting him when we rode here, something about follow knowledge like a sinking star. Beyond the utmost bound of human thought, she finished, surprised he'd noted the quotation she'd murmured almost to herself during their journey. Thank you. This is thoughtful, he nodded, still maintaining a careful distance. I want to apologize for my abruptness at dinner. The news from Wood River was concerning. Concerning how? I thought you said they were in custody. Quinn hesitated. May I come in? This isn't for everyone's ears. Propriety dictated she refuse, but Gabriella found herself stepping aside. Quinn entered, leaving the door conspicuously open, and kept a respectable distance between them. Mayor Hastings has connections in the territorial government, he said in a low voice. He's already trying to have the charges dismissed, and there have been threats against potential witnesses. Gabriella sank onto the edge of the bed. Threats against me, you mean? Against anyone who might testify, Quinn's jaw tightened. I didn't want to worry you until I had more information. So that's why you've been so formal today. You're concerned. He met her eyes directly. I'm responsible for your safety, Gabriella. I brought you into this by encouraging you to testify. You didn't force me into anything, she countered. I chose to stand against corruption in Wood River long before I met you." A hint of admiration warmed his expression. "You have uncommon courage for a schoolteacher." "Perhaps schoolteachers require more courage than people realize," she replied. "Facing 30 children with nothing but a primer and determination is not for the faint-hearted." That drew a genuine smile from him. "Point taken." He sobered again. "Still, until this is resolved, you're safest here. I've asked Ezra to increase the hands patrolling the ranch boundaries. You really believe Hastings would send men after me?" "I believe men with power and money will go to great lengths to keep both," Quinn said grimly. "I've seen it before." Gabriella clutched the book of poetry like a talisman. "What happens now?" "I ride to Wood River tomorrow to oversee the case preparation. You stay here where my family can protect you if necessary." "For 2 weeks. Until the trial," Quinn nodded. "I'll return when I can, but my duty is to justice. I understand." Gabriella couldn't quite keep disappointment from her voice. He studied her face. "This isn't how I would choose things if choice were mine." Something in his tone made her heart beat faster. "What would you choose if you could?" For a moment, Quinn's carefully maintained reserve slipped, and Gabriella glimpsed emotion in his eyes that stole her breath. Then, as quickly as it appeared, it was masked again. "That's not a path I can walk right now," he said quietly. "Good night, Miss Zander. I'll be gone before dawn." He left before she could respond, closing the door softly behind him. Gabriella stared at the space he'd occupied, the book clutched forgotten in her hands, wondering at the unspoken current that seemed to flow between them despite all reason and propriety. True to his word, Quinn departed before Gabriella woke the next morning, leaving only a brief note with Martha explaining he would send word when he could. The days that followed settled into a rhythm of work and waiting. Gabriella threw herself into ranch life, learning from Martha and assisting Emma with her students when they gathered for lessons. The Ingram women welcomed her as if she'd always been part of their household. Martha taught her to make soap and candles, skills Gabriella had never needed in her previous life. Emma shared her books and her dreams of establishing a proper school that would serve all the children in the area, not just those whose parents could spare them from farm work. A week passed without word from Quinn. Gabriella tried not to worry, telling herself he was simply busy with the case. Still, each day she found herself watching the road, hoping for a rider bearing news. "He's fine," Martha assured her one evening as they sat on the porch shelling beans. "Quinn knows how to take care of himself." "I'm not worried," Gabriella lied. Martha's knowing smile was too much like Emma's. "Of course not, dear." She set aside her bowl. "You know, when Henry was courting me, he once rode 50 miles through a blizzard just to bring me a birthday gift, Mrs. Ingram." "Martha, please." "Martha, I think you misunderstand. Your son and I barely know each other." "Sometimes knowing comes quick, sometimes slow," Martha said philosophically. "But I've raised that boy, and I know when something's stirring his heart." "Haven't seen that look since before the war." Gabriella felt her cheeks warm. "He's a good man who helped someone in trouble, that's all." "If you say so," Martha said, in exactly the same tone Emma had used days earlier. "But good men who only feel duty don't ride 30 miles round trip to bring a woman books." "Books?" Gabriella echoed, confused. Martha pointed to a package on the side table. "Came by yesterday's post. Ordered from a bookseller in Omaha, according to the wrapping. Quinn's name is on the sender line." Heart pounding, Gabriella opened the package to find 3 volumes of primer, an arithmetic text, and a collection of American poetry. A note tucked inside the poetry book read simply, "Tools for whatever path you choose next. Q." The thoughtfulness of the gesture overwhelmed her. These weren't just any books, but specifically chosen for teaching, as if he understood that regardless of what happened in Wood River, education remained her calling. "Not just duty," Martha said softly, watching Gabriella's face. The following day brought Quinn himself, riding into the yard as Gabriella was hanging laundry. She spotted him from the clothesline and had to force herself not to run to meet him, instead continuing her task with deliberate care despite her racing heart. He dismounted wearily, speaking briefly to Ezra before turning toward the house. When he saw Gabriella, he changed direction, coming to where she worked. "Miss Zander," he greeted her, removing his hat. A week of worry and trail dust had left its mark on him. He looked tired, with new lines around his eyes and a certain tightness to his mouth. "Marshal," she replied, striving for casualness, "you look like you could use a meal and a bath." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "That obvious, is it?" "Only to someone with eyes." She pinned the last sheet to the line. "Thank you for the books. You received them. Good." He seemed almost embarrassed. "I thought they might be useful, whatever you decide after all this." "They're perfect," she said. "Truly." They stood in awkward silence for a moment, both apparently at a loss for words now that they faced each other again. "How goes the case?" Gabriella finally asked. Quinn glanced toward the house. "Could we walk? I'd rather discuss it privately." They moved away from the buildings toward a small rise overlooking the creek. Quinn kept a proper distance between them, but Gabriella was acutely aware of his presence nonetheless. "Hastings has been busy," he said, once they were beyond earshot of the house. "Called in favors, hired expensive lawyers from Omaha. His story is that you fabricated the embezzlement accusations because he rebuffed your romantic advances." Gabriella stopped walking, stunned. "That's absurd. The man is 3 times my age and married." "I know," Quinn assured her. "And we have evidence supporting your version. The problem is the kidnapping. Hastings claims he knew nothing about it, that Mills acted alone. And Mills, willing to take the fall for a price. He'll likely serve some time, but Hastings is trying to walk away clean." Fury rose in Gabriella. "After everything they did, we need your testimony more than ever," Quinn said. "Your records of the missing funds, your account of what happened. Without it, Hastings might succeed." "Of course I'll testify," Gabriella declared. "I won't let him escape justice." Quinn studied her with something like pride. "I never doubted you would stand firm." He hesitated. "But there's risk. Hastings has hired men, not just lawyers. The local marshals have intercepted 2 who were asking questions about you in nearby towns." A chill ran through Gabriella despite the warm day. "He's still trying to silence me." "Yes, which is why I've made arrangements. The judge arrives in 5 days. We'll travel to Wood River together with an escort of marshals. You'll testify, and then—" He paused. "And then," she prompted. "That depends on you," Quinn said carefully. "If you wish to resume your position in Wood River, I'll ensure the town council understands their new schoolteacher is under federal protection. Or if you prefer to start fresh elsewhere, I have colleagues in several territorial capitals who could help arrange a teaching position." He'd thought of everything, Gabriella realized. Every possible path forward except the one that had begun to form in her own heart. "And what of you once this is over?" she asked softly. Something flickered in his eyes. "Back to my duties. There's always work for a marshal in these territories. Always moving on, never staying. It's the nature of the job. And if there were a reason to stay—" The question slipped out before she could reconsider its boldness. Quinn's expression grew very still. "Gabriella," he said, her name almost a sigh. "I can't offer—" "Quinn," Emma's voice carried across the yard. "Mother says come in before your dinner gets cold." The moment fractured. Quinn stepped back, replacing his hat with a gesture that seemed almost like a shield. "We should go in," he said, his voice once again the marshal's professional tone. Gabriella nodded, swallowing disappointment as they walked back to the house in silence. Dinner was a curious blend of celebration and tension. Martha and Emma were delighted to have Quinn home, pressing him for news of Wood River and the wider territory. He answered their questions easily. The strain Gabriella had sensed earlier seemingly vanished in the warmth of family. Yet she felt his gaze on her when he thought she wasn't looking, and sometimes caught an expression on his face that made her wonder what thoughts he kept to himself. After the meal, Quinn excused himself to clean up and rest, having ridden since dawn. Emma cornered Gabriella in the kitchen as they washed dishes. "Well," she demanded in a whisper. "Well, what? Don't play innocent. Something's different between you two, I can see it." Gabriella focused intently on drying a plate. "Your imagination is impressive, Emma." "Is it?" Then why did Quinn ask Mother if the blue room was still furnished this morning? The blue room, the one Father built for when Quinn married. It's been empty for years. Emma's eyes gleamed with triumph. "He's thinking about the future, Gabriella. A future that might include more than just marshalling." Before Gabriella could respond, Martha joined them, ending the conversation with a pointed look at her daughter. But the seed was planted, and Gabriella found sleep elusive that night, her mind filled with possibilities she'd never dared consider before. The next days passed in a flurry of preparation. Quinn received telegrams daily, updating him on the situation in Wood River. The trial was scheduled, witnesses arranged. Hastings continued his attempts to undermine the case, but the evidence against him remained strong. Despite the serious circumstances, Gabriella found moments of unexpected joy. Quinn showed her the ranch he'd grown up on, riding beside her through green pastures and along the winding creek. He told stories of his childhood, of lessons learned from his father, of dreams set aside when duty called. In those moments, away from the house and the watching eyes of his family, Quinn seemed to lower his guard. He laughed more freely, his face relaxing into an openness that made Gabriella's heart ache with tenderness. On the third day, they rode to a high meadow filled with wildflowers where the creek began its journey down to the ranch. "My father proposed to my mother here," Quinn said as they dismounted to let the horses drink. "Said he knew from the moment he met her that she was the only woman who could make sense of his life." Gabriella traced a finger over a purple coneflower. "They seem well matched from the stories you've told." They were. Quinn's voice held gentle reverence. Even when they disagreed, which was often and loudly, they faced everything as partners. "You must miss him very much." "Every day." Quinn knelt beside the creek, filling his canteen. "He taught me what it means to be a man of principle, to stand for something larger than yourself." "Is that why you became a marshal? To stand for something?" He considered the question. "Partly. After the war, I saw how thin the line is between civilization and chaos, how easily the strong can prey on the weak when no one stands between them." He straightened. "The badge gives me authority to protect those who need protecting." "Like me," Gabriella said softly. "You protected yourself first," Quinn corrected. "Had the courage to stand against corruption when many would have looked away. Fat lot of good it did me. I still ended up bound for nowhere in that wagon." "Not nowhere," Quinn said, his voice lowering. "Here." The word hung between them, laden with meaning neither seemed ready to fully acknowledge. Gabriella looked away first, her pulse quickening. "Will you testify about finding me?" she asked, changing the subject. "About the wagon, of course. My testimony, along with the deputy's confessions, should be enough to convict Mills. Your records and testimony are what we need to tie Hastings to the embezzlement and the kidnapping order." "I'm ready," Gabriella assured him, though her stomach tightened at the thought of facing the men who had nearly ended her life. "I know you are." Quinn's gaze held admiration. "You're the bravest schoolteacher I've ever met, Gabriella Zander. How many have you met?" She teased, trying to lighten the moment. "Enough to know an extraordinary one when I see her." His voice was serious despite her attempt at humor. Heat rose to Gabriella's cheeks. "We should head back," she said, suddenly overwhelmed by the intensity in his eyes. "Your mother will be expecting us for dinner." Quinn nodded, though something like regret flickered across his face as he helped her mount. The day before they were to depart for Wood River, a fierce thunderstorm swept across the plains. Rain lashed the windows of the ranch house, and lightning split the sky with blinding frequency. Travel was impossible, forcing Quinn to send a telegram delaying their arrival in Wood River by a day. Confined indoors, the household turned to indoor pursuits. Martha mended clothing, Emma graded her students' copybooks, and Quinn cleaned his guns at the kitchen table. A ritual Gabriella found both methodical and somehow comforting. Finding herself at loose ends, Gabriella retrieved the Tennyson volume Quinn had lent her and settled in a chair near the fireplace, where Martha had lit a small blaze to ward off the damp chill. She was deep in Ulysses when Quinn's voice startled her. "To strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield," he quoted, looking over her shoulder. Father's favorite line. Gabriella closed the book. "Mine as well, though I've always preferred in memoriam." "'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all," Quinn recited softly. "You know Tennyson well for a Marshal." He sat in the chair opposite her. "Books travel better than most companions on long rides. Poetry stays in the mind when other words fade." Gabriella studied him in the firelight, this complex man who moved with such ease between world's lawman and scholar, son and protector. "What will you do when the territories are all settled, all tamed, when there's no more frontier requiring marshals?" "Haven't thought that far ahead," Quinn admitted. "Though lately I've been considering whether that day might come sooner for me than for the territories." "Meaning," he seemed about to answer when Martha called from the kitchen. "Quinn, there's riders coming." In an instant he was on his feet, gun in hand, moving to the window. "Stay inside," he ordered, all softness gone from his voice. Gabriella joined Martha and Emma in the kitchen as Quinn conferred with Ezra on the porch, both men peering through the curtain of rain. "4 men," Ezra reported. "Riding hard. Could be trouble," Quinn said grimly. "Get the women to the back room." "Quinn," Martha protested, "if these are Hastings' men, then I'll handle them," he finished firmly. "Please, Mother." Martha nodded reluctantly, leading Emma and Gabriella to a bedroom at the rear of the house. From the window, they could see little through the driving rain, but the sound of horses arriving in the yard came clearly. "Stay down," Martha whispered, drawing a small derringer from her apron pocket. When Gabriella stared, the older woman smiled tightly. "Henry's first gift to me. Never needed it, but always kept it close." Minutes stretched like hours as they waited. Voices came from the front of the house, men's voices, raised but indistinct. Then Quinn appeared at the bedroom door. "It's all right," he said, though his expression remained wary. "Federal marshals from Omaha. They've come to escort us to Wood River." Relief flooded through Gabriella. "So we're still going tomorrow." "Weather permitting," Quinn confirmed. "The storm's moving east, should clear by morning." The marshals, 4 weather-beaten men with tired eyes and firm handshakes, joined them for dinner. They brought news that increased the urgency of reaching Wood River. Hastings had filed motions to dismiss all charges, claiming insufficient evidence. Judge Harmon denied the motions. The lead marshal, a gray-haired man named Dawson, explained, "But Hastings isn't giving up. He's bringing in character witnesses to impugn Miss Zander's reputation." "My reputation," Gabriella gasped. "I've done nothing wrong." "Doesn't matter," Quinn said grimly. "In a case like this, sometimes the victim ends up on trial more than the accused." Dawson nodded. "Which is why we need to get you there as scheduled. Your testimony, delivered firmly and clearly, will counter whatever tales they spin." After dinner, while the other marshals settled in the barn, Quinn took Gabriella aside in the parlor. "I want you prepared for what may happen," he said, voice low. "Hastings' lawyers will try to discredit you. They may suggest improper relationships, question your motives, even your sanity." "Let them," Gabriella said, squaring her shoulders. "I have nothing to hide." Quinn's expression softened. "I know that, but facing such accusations publicly can be difficult. I stood against them once. I can do it again." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Yes, you can." He hesitated, then added, "Whatever happens in Wood River, I want you to know." A crash of thunder directly overhead interrupted him, making both of them jump. The lamps flickered, and rain intensified against the windows. "You should rest," Quinn said, the unfinished thought left hanging between them. "Tomorrow will be challenging enough without exhaustion." Morning brought clearing skies and a flurry of activity. The marshals readied their horses while Martha packed food for the journey. Emma hugged Gabriella fiercely. "Come back to us when it's over," she whispered. "Promise me." "I'll try," Gabriella replied, unable to make a firmer commitment when her future remained so uncertain. Martha embraced her next. "You have a home here, whatever you decide," the older woman said firmly. "Remember that." Quinn helped Gabriella mount the gentle mare she'd ridden during their explorations of the ranch. "Stay between Marshal Dawson and me at all times," he instructed. "If there's trouble, do exactly as we say." The journey to Wood River would take most of the day. They rode at a steady pace, the marshals vigilant, scanning the horizon regularly. Gabriella found herself studying the landscape with new eyes, noting how beautiful the rain-washed prairie appeared in the clear light. "Penny for your thoughts," Quinn said, riding alongside her during a brief rest stop. "I was thinking how quickly the world can change," she replied. "A month ago, I never imagined leaving Wood River. Now I'm not sure I can return to the life I had there." "Change isn't always for the worse," he observed. Gabriella met his eyes. "No, it isn't." Something unspoken passed between them, a current of understanding that needed no words. Then Dawson called for them to mount up, and the moment was gone. As they neared Wood River, Gabriella's apprehension grew. The familiar outlines of the town appeared on the horizon: the church steeple, the water tower, the larger buildings of Main Street. Places that had once represented home now filled her with dread. "Courage," Quinn murmured, sensing her tension. "Remember why we're here." They entered town in formation, two marshals leading, Gabriella between Quinn and Dawson, two marshals behind. People stopped to stare as they passed, and Gabriella held her head high despite her pounding heart. The courthouse, normally the town hall, had been prepared for the circuit judge's arrival. A crowd had gathered outside, parting reluctantly for the marshal's horses. "Miss Zander," a voice called from the crowd. Gabriella turned to see Mrs. Henderson, mother of one of her students, waving. "We're with you." Several other parents and students joined in, calling encouragement. Tears pricked Gabriella's eyes at this unexpected support. Quinn helped her dismount. "See, not everyone believes Hastings lies." Inside the courthouse, preparations were underway for the next day's proceedings. Judge Harmon, a stern-faced man with impressive side whiskers, greeted Quinn with respect. "Marshal Ingram, glad to see you've brought our key witness safely." He nodded to Gabriella. "Miss Zander, I've read your statement. Very thorough. I look forward to your testimony tomorrow." "Thank you, Your Honor," she replied, finding strength in his matter-of-fact manner. Quinn led her to a small room where other witnesses waited to be interviewed by the prosecution. "I need to confer with the judge and the other marshals," he explained. "Will you be all right here?" "I'll be fine," she assured him, though her voice wavered slightly. His hand brushed hers, a fleeting touch that might have seemed accidental to observers but sent warmth through her fingers. "I'll be back soon." Left alone among strangers, Gabriella took stock of the other witnesses. Most were townspeople she recognized: the banker, several members of the town council, parents of her students. They nodded to her with varying degrees of awkwardness and sympathy. A young woman approached, offering a cup of water. "Miss Zander, I'm Elizabeth Wells. My brother Johnny was in your class before." She trailed off. "I remember Johnny," Gabriella said, smiling. "Bright boy, excellent at mathematics." Elizabeth nodded eagerly. "He was so upset when you disappeared. We all were. Then when they arrested the sheriff and said he'd tried to." She lowered her voice. "Well, most of us never believed you'd run off the way Mayor Hastings claimed." "Claimed I'd run off," Gabriella repeated, confused. "Is that what he told people? At first. Said you'd stolen school funds and fled. But then Marshal Ingram arrived with those deputies and the whole story came out." Elizabeth squeezed Gabriella's arm. "We're glad you're safe, and Johnny hopes you'll be his teacher again when this is over." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the prosecutor, a sharp-eyed man named Thornton who interviewed each witness methodically. When Gabriella's turn came, he reviewed her statement carefully. "Your testimony is our linchpin, Miss Zander," he said frankly. "Without it, we might convict Mills but lose Hastings. Are you prepared for aggressive cross-examination?" "As prepared as I can be," she replied honestly. "Good. Remember, stick to the facts. Don't let them provoke an emotional response, and look at the jury when you speak." He closed his notebook. "Where are you staying tonight?" Gabriella realized she hadn't thought that far ahead. "I'm not sure." "The hotel's been arranged," Quinn's voice came from the doorway. "Under guard." Thornton nodded approvingly. "Excellent. Get some rest, Miss Zander. Tomorrow will be demanding." As they left the courthouse, Quinn kept close beside Gabriella, his presence both protective and reassuring. "The town's divided," he explained in a low voice. "Most ordinary folks support you, but Hastings has influence with the business owners and wealthier citizens." "I heard he told people I'd run away with stolen money," Gabriella said, still shocked by the lie. Quinn nodded grimly. "Standard tactic. Discredit the victim before the truth emerges. We countered it quickly with the deputy's confessions, but some damage was done." The Wood River Hotel stood a block from the courthouse, a respectable establishment catering to drummers and other travelers. Quinn escorted Gabriella to a room on the second floor, checking it thoroughly before allowing her to enter. "Two marshals will rotate shifts in the hallway," he explained. "I'll be next door. If you need anything at all, just call out." "Thank you," she said, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of what awaited her tomorrow. "Quinn, what if I fail? What if they don't believe me?" "They will," he said firmly. "Truth has power, Gabriella. Speak it plainly and it will be heard." Impulsively, she reached for his hand. "Will you stay? Just for a moment? I don't want to be alone with my thoughts right now." Propriety dictated he refuse an unmarried woman, alone in a hotel room with a man. But Quinn closed the door behind him, though he maintained a careful distance, standing by the window while she sat on the edge of the bed. "Tell me about your students," he said. "The ones you'd like to return to if you could." Grateful for the distraction, Gabriella spoke of Johnny Wells with his head for figures, of Mary Sullivan, who wrote stories about fairies living in the schoolyard, of the Hanson twins who finished each other's sentences. As she talked, The tension gradually left her shoulders, replaced by the passion that had brought her west to teach in the first place. "You love it," Quinn observed. "Teaching. It's not just work for you. It's my calling," she admitted. Seeing a child's face when understanding dawns, there's nothing like it. And yet you risked it all to stand against corruption. "What lesson would I be teaching if I looked away from wrongdoing?" she asked simply. Quinn's expression softened with something that might have been admiration. A valid point. They talked for nearly an hour, careful subjects that kept fear and uncertainty at bay. When Quinn finally left, Gabriella felt steadier, more prepared for what lay ahead. The courthouse was packed the next morning. It seemed everyone in Wood River had come to witness the proceedings. Gabriella sat with Thornton, trying to ignore the hostile stares from Hastings' supporters and the former mayor's smug confidence at the defense table. Judge Harmon called the court to order precisely at 9. "This court will hear evidence in the matter of the Territory versus Mills and Hastings on charges of embezzlement, kidnapping, and conspiracy," he announced. "Mr. Thornton, call your first witness." The prosecution built its case methodically. The town treasurer testified to irregularities in the school fund. 2 council members admitted approving expenditures that never reached the school. Then came Quinn, his testimony precise and professional, as he described finding Gabriella bound in the wagon and the subsequent confessions of the deputies. Finally, Thornton called Gabriella. She took the stand, conscious of every eye in the room upon her, including Quinn's steady, supportive gaze from where he stood at the back. "Miss Zander," Thornton began, "please tell the court how you came to suspect funds were being diverted from the school." Drawing a deep breath, Gabriella began her testimony. She spoke clearly, presenting the facts as they had occurred: her discovery of the discrepancies, her confrontation with Hastings, the night the deputies came for her. When she described the wagon journey and Quinn's timely intervention, a murmur ran through the courtroom. "Thank you, Miss Zander," Thornton concluded. "No further questions, Your Honor." Hastings' lawyer rose, a sleek man from Omaha with cold eyes and a practiced smile. "Miss Zander, you came to Wood River from Pennsylvania, is that correct?" "Yes. Alone, no family, no connections here. That's correct." "Why would a young woman travel so far alone? Were you perhaps running from something?" "Objection," Thornton called. "Irrelevant and prejudicial." "I'm establishing the witness's credibility, Your Honor," the defense lawyer argued smoothly. Judge Harmon frowned. "I'll allow it, but tread carefully, Mr. Whitman." Whitman turned back to Gabriella. "Well, Miss Zander, I came west because teaching positions here offered independence and higher wages than in the East," she replied evenly. "I was not running from anything." The questions grew increasingly personal and insinuating. Whitman implied Gabriella had invented the embezzlement charges to extort money from Hastings, suggested she had improper relationships with town council members, even questioned her mental stability. Through it all, Gabriella maintained her composure, answering truthfully and directly, refusing to be baited into anger or tears. She kept her eyes on Quinn periodically, drawing strength from his unwavering support. "Finally, Miss Zander," Whitman said, his tone falsely sympathetic, "isn't it true that you've developed a close relationship with Marshal Ingram during your supposed rescue? Might that not color your testimony in this case?" Gabriella's cheeks burned, but her voice remained steady. "Marshal Ingram saved my life and provided protection when I had nowhere else to turn. My testimony is based on facts and records, not personal feelings." "No further questions," Whitman said, a satisfied smirk suggesting he believed he'd scored a point. Judge Harmon called a recess for lunch. Quinn found Gabriella in the witness room, his expression concerned. "You did well," he said. Very well. Whitman's tactics are desperate. He has little to counter the evidence. He implied there was something improper between us, Gabriella said, still stinging from the insinuation. Quinn's jaw tightened. Standard defense strategy: discredit the witness when you can't discredit the testimony. Is it working? The jury looked. The jury saw a dignified young woman telling the truth against powerful men, Quinn assured her. Trust in that. The trial resumed with the defense presenting its case. Character witnesses praised Hastings' contributions to Wood River. The defense argued that Sheriff Mills had acted alone, without Hastings' knowledge or approval. Mills himself testified, claiming he'd misunderstood Hastings' instructions to deal with the problem. By late afternoon, closing arguments concluded. Judge Harmon instructed the jury and sent them to deliberate. Court will reconvene when the jury returns with a verdict, he announced. Given the hour, that may be tomorrow. Now we wait, Thornton told Gabriella as they left the courthouse. You did everything you could. Quinn escorted her back to the hotel. You should eat, he insisted, ordering dinner sent to her room. Keep up your strength. I'm not sure I can eat, she admitted. My stomach is in knots. Try, he urged gently. For me. The simple phrase, with its implication of caring, warmed her more than she could express. All right, for you. He left her to rest, promising to return if news came. Alone, Gabriella paced the small room, too agitated to sit. The day's testimony replayed in her mind, particularly Whitman's insinuations about her relationship with Quinn. Were her feelings for the marshal so obvious that a stranger could perceive and exploit them? And what of Quinn's feelings? There had been moments at the creek, in the meadow, even tonight, when she thought she glimpsed something more than duty in his eyes. But he had never spoken plainly, never crossed the line between protector and suitor. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Expecting dinner, she opened the door without checking, only to find Quinn standing there, his expression urgently serious. The jury's back already, he said. Harmon's reconvening court. So soon? Gabriella's heart raced. Is that good or bad? Could be either. Come on. The courthouse was filled to capacity when they arrived, the atmosphere tense with anticipation. Gabriella took her seat beside Thornton, while Quinn resumed his position at the back of the room. Judge Harmon gavelled for silence. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman, a wheat farmer Gabriella recognized from parent meetings, stood. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of embezzlement against Mayor James Hastings, how do you find? Guilty, Your Honor. A collective gasp rose from the spectators. Hastings' face flushed crimson with rage. On the charge of conspiracy to commit kidnapping against Mayor James Hastings, how do you find? Guilty, Your Honor. Relief washed through Gabriella so powerfully she felt dizzy. Thornton squeezed her arm in congratulation as the judge continued, finding Mills guilty on all counts as well. Sentencing will take place tomorrow morning, Harmon announced. Court is adjourned. Outside, well-wishers surrounded Gabriella, offering congratulations and apologies for ever doubting her. Through the crowd, she caught glimpses of Quinn speaking with the other marshals, his expression relieved but reserved. When he finally reached her side, he simply said, "It's done. Justice prevailed." "Thanks to you," she replied. He shook his head. "No, thanks to your courage and persistence." They walked back to the hotel together, the evening air cool against Gabriella's flushed cheeks. Victory felt surreal after so many days of fear and uncertainty. "What happens now?" she asked as they reached her door. "To Hastings and Mills. Prison, most likely," Quinn replied. Judge Harmon isn't known for leniency in cases of public corruption. And to you, Quinn hesitated, something vulnerable flickering across his normally composed features. "That depends, doesn't it?" "On what?" "On what you want, Gabriella." His voice dropped lower. On what future you see for yourself now? Her heart pounded as she recognized the opening she'd been waiting for. I want to teach, she said honestly. It's what I'm called to do. Wood River needs a teacher, he observed. The children ask about you, their parents too. And would I be safe here now? Truly, I believe so. Hastings' influence dies with his conviction, and Quinn paused, seeming to gather courage. And I've been offered a position. A position, Gabriella echoed, confused. Regional Marshal Supervisor for this territory. Based in Omaha, but requiring regular circuits through towns like Wood River. His eyes held hers intently. It would mean less traveling, more stability, a chance to put down roots. The implication hung between them, almost but not quite spoken. That sounds like a good opportunity, Gabriella said carefully, her pulse racing. For the right person. I believe I could be that person, Quinn replied, with the proper motivation. And what might that motivation be, Marshal Ingram? Instead of answering, Quinn took her hand, his calloused thumb brushing across her knuckles. I've faced armed outlaws with less trepidation than I feel right now, he confessed, a smile touching his lips. Gabriella Zander, from the moment I found you in that wagon, fierce and determined despite everything you'd endured, you've occupied my thoughts in a way no one has in years. Quinn, she breathed, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. I know it's sudden, he continued, and perhaps inappropriate given the circumstances, but I find myself unwilling to ride away from Wood River from you without speaking plainly. Then speak, she urged, stepping closer. I care for you, he said simply, more than duty or propriety should allow. And if you could consider a future that includes a marshal with too many miles behind him and not enough poetry in his soul. Gabriella silenced him with a finger to his lips. You have poetry enough, she whispered, to recognize it in others, to bring books to a displaced schoolteacher, to show her meadows where your father proposed to your mother. Hope kindled in Quinn's eyes. You're not refusing outright. That's promising. I'm not refusing at all, Gabriella said, finding courage in his vulnerability. But neither am I accepting an offer that hasn't been properly made. A genuine smile spread across Quinn's face, transforming his serious features. Properly made. Well then. He took both her hands in his. Miss Gabriella Zander, would you do me the honor of considering a courtship between us, with all proper respect and your reputation intact? Joy bubbled up within her. I would consider it most carefully, Marshal Ingram, she replied, matching his formal tone though her eyes danced with happiness. And I suspect my answer would be favorable. Quinn's smile widened. Then may I call on you tomorrow after the sentencing? Perhaps a walk through town, in full view of the citizens who should witness the rehabilitation of your good name. You may, she agreed. Though tongues will wag. Let them, Quinn said, his voice deepening. I've never cared much for gossip. He raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles with a gentleness that made her heart stutter. Until tomorrow, Miss Zander. Until tomorrow, Marshal. After he'd gone, Gabriella pressed her hands to her flushed cheeks, hardly able to believe the turn her fortunes had taken. From captive in a wagon bound for nowhere, to this. A future opening before her with possibilities she'd never dared imagine. The sentencing the next morning was appropriately severe. Judge Harmon sentenced Hastings to 8 years in the territorial prison for embezzlement and conspiracy. Mills to 5 years for his role in the kidnapping. The deputies who had transported Gabriella received lesser sentences in exchange for their testimony. Throughout the proceedings, Quinn stood at the back of the courtroom, his steady presence a reminder of how much had changed since that dusty day on the trail to Dakota Territory. Afterward, true to his word, he offered Gabriella his arm for a walk through Wood River. They strolled down Main Street, past the schoolhouse where children waved excitedly at their former teacher, past shops where proprietors nodded respectfully, no longer swayed by Hastings' influence. "The school board wants to meet with you," Quinn told her. "They're eager to have you resume your position with a substantial raise to compensate for your ordeal." "And if I accept," Gabriella asked, watching his face carefully, "would that fit with your plans?" "Wood River is on my circuit," he reminded her. "I'd have reason to visit regularly. And Omaha is just a day's journey by train. That's quite a courtship, seeing each other every few weeks." Quinn stopped walking, turning to face her. "I was thinking more frequent visits might be possible. Perhaps a small house halfway between Wood River and Omaha. Somewhere we could both call home eventually." "Eventually," Gabriella echoed, heart quickening. "I believe in doing things properly, Miss Zander," Quinn said, though his eyes held promise. "A courtship should precede a proposal, but I want you to know my intentions are permanent." "As are mine," she replied softly, "though I insist on at least 3 months of proper courtship before considering any proposals." Quinn's laugh was free and unrestrained, drawing curious glances from passers-by. 3 months it is, starting today." Exactly 3 months later, Gabriella Zander stood in the wildflower meadow where Henry Ingram had proposed to Martha decades earlier. Quinn knelt before her, a simple gold ring gleaming in his palm. "I told you once that I became a marshal to stand for something larger than myself," he said, voice husky with emotion. "I never imagined that something would be a future with you, a home, a family, all the things I'd set aside for duty." He took her hand. "Gabriella Zander, will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered, tears of joy blurring her vision. "Yes, Quinn Ingram, I will." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to gather her into his arms. Their kiss was tender at first, then deepening with the promise of all they would share in the years to come. Martha and Emma were waiting at the ranch house when they returned, having anticipated Quinn's plans. The celebration lasted well into the evening, with neighboring ranchers joining to toast the engagement. They were married that autumn in the Wood River schoolhouse, with Judge Harmon officiating and Gabriella's students singing hymns. Quinn looked resplendent in a new black suit, while Gabriella wore a gown of ivory silk that Martha had helped sew. True to his word, Quinn purchased land between Wood River and Omaha, building a comfortable house where Gabriella could maintain her garden while he fulfilled his duties as regional marshal supervisor. When he traveled his circuit, she continued teaching, her reputation growing as one of the finest educators in the territory. Within 2 years, their first child arrived, a son they named Henry, after Quinn's father. A daughter, Margaret, followed 18 months later. By then, Quinn had arranged his duties to keep him closer to home, supervising younger marshals rather than riding the trails himself. On summer evenings, they often sat on their wide porch, watching their children play in the yard while the Nebraska sun painted the sky in brilliant orange and gold. Sometimes Quinn read Tennyson aloud, his deep voice giving life to the poet's words as Gabriella leaned against his shoulder. "You ever regret it?" she asked once, "giving up the wandering life of a marshal for this?" Quinn looked around at their home, their children, and finally at Gabriella herself, his eyes filled with the love that had grown deeper with each passing year. "Not for a single moment," he replied, taking her hand. "That wagon may have been bound for nowhere, but it led me to everywhere I ever needed to be." Years later, when their children were grown and Wood River had transformed from frontier town to bustling community, Gabriella sometimes found herself remembering that terrifying journey in the wagon. Not with fear or regret, but with a sense of wonder at how a path that seemed destined for darkness had led instead to the brightest light of her life. For in saving her, Quinn Ingram had found his own salvation. And in that redemption, they had built something neither could have imagined alone, a legacy of love, justice, and abiding faith in possibilities that lay beyond the next horizon.